400 meters above the Kursk salient, July 9, 1943, 14:16 hours, Moscow time. Senior Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov is flying an Ilyushin Il-2 Sturmovik at 290 kilometers per hour when the Mikulin AM-38F engine begins to overheat. The cylinder head temperature gauge climbs past the red line. The oil pressure drops. The propeller governor is no longer maintaining constant RPM. The engine is running rough. Volkov can feel the vibration through the control column. Ahead of him, the target is visible, a column of German tanks moving east along the Oboyan Road. His bomb load is 400 kilograms of anti-tank munitions. His fuel state is sufficient for another 40 minutes. His engine is failing. Behind him, in the rear gunner's position, Sergeant Ivan Petrov monitors the sky for enemy fighters. The canopy over Petrov Station is open. The slipstream is deafening. The intercom crackles, but communication is difficult over the engine noise. Petrov does not know the engine is failing. He knows only that they are approaching the target and that German flak is beginning to appear below. If you appreciate these detailed accounts of aviation history, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. And in the comments below, let us know where you're listening from. Now, let's understand why this mission mattered. The strategic context at Kursk in July of 1943 is one of maximum effort on both sides. The German offensive, Operation Citadel, began on July 5th with the objective of encircling and destroying Soviet forces in the Kursk salient. The salient is a bulge in the front line, 190 kilometers wide and 150 kilometers deep, jutting westward into German-held territory. The Germans attack from the north and south simultaneously, intending to meet behind Soviet lines and trap multiple armies. The Soviet defense is layered and dense: minefields, anti-tank ditches, artillery positions, and reserves positioned in depth. The battle is the largest armored engagement in history. Over 6,000 tanks are committed. The outcome will determine whether Germany can regain the initiative on the Eastern Front or whether the Soviet Union will begin the long drive west toward Berlin. Air power is critical. The Luftwaffe commits 1,500 aircraft to support the offensive. The Soviet Air Force commits 2,700. The missions are close air support, attacking enemy armor, disrupting supply columns, interdicting reinforcements. The Il-2 Sturmovik is the primary Soviet ground attack aircraft. It is armored, heavily armed, and designed specifically for low-altitude strikes against hardened targets. The Germans call it the Black Death. Soviet pilots call it the Flying Tank. Both names are accurate. The Il-2's armor is structural. Unlike most aircraft, where armor is added as plating over the fuselage, the Il-2's armor is part of the airframe. The forward fuselage is an armored shell, 5 to 12 millimeters thick, protecting the engine, cockpit, cooling system, and fuel tanks. The armor weighs 700 kilograms, but it is integral to the aircraft's structure, carrying flight loads. This design makes the Il-2 extraordinarily resistant to ground fire. Small arms and light anti-aircraft fire are ineffective. Even 20-millimeter cannon hits rarely penetrate the armor. But the armor has a cost. The aircraft is heavy. Fully loaded, it weighs 6,300 kilograms. The Mikulin AM-38F engine produces 1,700 horsepower, giving a power-to-weight ratio that is marginal. Maneuverability is poor. Climb rate is low. If the engine fails, the glide ratio is approximately 8:1, meaning the aircraft loses 1 meter of altitude for every 8 meters of forward travel. From 400 meters, the glide distance is 3 kilometers. This is not enough to reach friendly lines if the engine fails over the target area. The armament is formidable. Two 23mm VYA cannons are mounted in the wings, synchronized to fire through the propeller arc. Two 7.62mm HKAS machine guns supplement the cannons. The rear gunner operates a single 12.7mm UBT machine gun for defense against fighters. The bomb load varies by mission. up to 600 kilograms of bombs, or 8 RS-82 rockets, or a combination. On anti-tank missions, the most effective weapon is the PTAB-2, a small-shaped charge bomblet. Each Il-2 carries up to 192 of these in cassettes mounted under the wings. When released, the cassettes open and scatter the bomblets across a wide area. A single bomblet can penetrate the thin top armor of a German tank. A successful attack can destroy multiple tanks in seconds. The tactical employment of the Il-2 is standardized. Flights of 4 to 8 aircraft approach the target at low altitude, below 200 meters when possible, to avoid radar detection and reduce exposure to flak. The approach is made at maximum speed. Over the target, the aircraft climbs to between 300 and 600 meters, rolls inverted, pulls through to dive at a 45-degree angle, releases ordnance, and pulls out at treetop level. The dive angle allows precise placement of bombs or rockets. The low-level egress makes it difficult for flak gunners to track the aircraft. Losses are high but acceptable. In July of 1943, Soviet ground attack aviation is losing approximately 4% of sorties flown. This means one aircraft in 25 does not return. The losses are replaced by production and by newly trained pilots arriving from training regiments. Senior Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov joined the Red Army Air Force in 1939. He was 18 years old and the son of a collective farm manager in Smolensk Oblast. He volunteered because military service offered technical training and advancement opportunities not available in rural life. The Air Force sent him to Initial Flight Training School at Borisoglepsk, where he learned to fly the UT-2 trainer. He soloed after 12 hours. His instructor noted that Volkov had steady hands and did not become flustered under pressure. These qualities are essential for ground attack pilots, who operate at altitudes where there is no time to recover from errors. He completed basic training in May of 1940 and was assigned to advanced training at Lipetsk. He transitioned to the I-153 Chaika biplane fighter, learning aerobatics and gunnery. In November of 1940, he was posted to a ground attack regiment and transitioned to the Il-2. The Il-2 was new. Production had begun only 6 months earlier. The aircraft was still being refined. Early models had no rear gunner. The aft cockpit was covered with a metal fairing. Losses to fighter attack from behind were catastrophic. By 1942, the design was modified to include a rear gunner position. This reduced losses but added weight and complexity. Volkov flew his first combat mission on June 23, 1941, the second day of the German invasion. His target was a column of German trucks near Minsk. He approached at 150 meters, strafed with cannons, and egressed at ground level. He did not observe the results. He was focused on survival. The Luftwaffe dominated the skies. Soviet airfields were being destroyed on the ground. Entire regiments were wiped out before they could launch. Volkov's regiment lost 32 aircraft in the first week. Replacements did not arrive. The surviving pilots flew multiple sorties per day with minimal rest. By July of 1943, Volkov has flown 217 combat sorties. He is credited with destroying 9 tanks, 14 trucks, 2 armored cars, and 1 locomotive. He has been shot down twice and has crash-landed 4 times. He has been wounded once, a shell fragment in his left thigh that required 3 weeks of hospitalization. He does not consider himself lucky. He considers himself persistent. Luck implies randomness. Persistence implies that survival is a matter of technique and discipline. Volkov's technique is solid. He follows procedures. He does not deviate from the attack profile. He does not linger over the target. He does not chase targets that require maneuvering. These habits have kept him alive longer than most of his peers. His rear gunner, Sergeant Ivan Petrov, joined the regiment in April of 1943. He is 20 years old and has 41 sorties. He was trained as an aircraft mechanic, but volunteered for aircrew duty because it offered better pay. The rear gunner position in the Il-2 is exposed and dangerous. The armor protecting the forward cockpit does not extend to the rear. Petrov sits behind a 12mm armor plate, but his sides and rear are unprotected. Fighter attacks from behind are often fatal for the gunner while the pilot survives. Petrov understands this. He accepted the assignment because the alternative was remaining on the ground, and ground duty offered no advancement. The mission briefing on July 9th occurs at 1200 hours. The target is a tank column identified by reconnaissance as part of the German 4th Panzer Army, moving east from the Aboyan direction. The column consists of approximately 30 tanks and supporting vehicles. Airstrikes are ordered to disrupt the advance and inflict maximum casualties. 12 Il-2s from the regiment will participate. Volkov's flight is assigned to the southern section of the column. The attack altitude is 400 meters. Ordnance load is 192 PTAB-2. 5 bomblets. Weather is clear with visibility. 15 kilometers. Temperature at altitude is 22 degrees Celsius. Wind is from the west at 12 kilometers per hour. Volkov walks to his aircraft at 13:30 hours. The Il-2, tail number White 27, is parked on the grass strip that serves as the regiment's airfield. The strip is 500 meters from the front line. German artillery can reach it. The ground crew works quickly and keeps the aircraft dispersed. White 27 has been serviced. Fuel tanks are full, 650 liters. Oil level is adequate. The 4 bomb cassettes are loaded and armed. Volkov conducts his external inspection. Control surfaces are intact. Tires are inflated. Propeller blades are undamaged. The armor shows multiple impacts from previous missions, but no penetrations. He climbs into the cockpit, and Petrov climbs into the rear position. The engine start procedure is standard. Primer pump, mixture rich, throttle cracked, magnetos on, energized starter. The Mikulin engine coughs and fires. It runs rough for 30 seconds and then smooths out. Volkov monitors the gauges. Oil pressure, 5 kilograms per square centimeter. Coolant temperature, 80 degrees Celsius. Cylinder head temperature, 210 degrees. All readings are normal. He signals ready to the flight leader. Takeoff is at 13:52 hours. The 12 Il-2s taxi in sequence and launch at 30-second intervals. Volkov is number 7. He advances the throttle and the aircraft accelerates. Tail comes up at 80 kilometers per hour. Liftoff occurs at 140 kilometers per hour. The climb is shallow. The Il-2 does not climb steeply when fully loaded. Volkov maintains 250 kilometers per hour and climbs at 3 meters per second. The flight assembles in loose formation at 600 meters and sets course southeast toward the target. The flight time to the target is 19 minutes. The formation flies at low altitude, following terrain to avoid detection. Volkov's attention is divided between maintaining formation and monitoring the engine. The gauges are steady. The engine is running smoothly. At 14:11, the flight leader spots the target and signals the attack. The formation climbs to 400 meters and begins the approach. Volkov can see the tanks now, dark shapes moving along the road, dust trailing behind them. The flak begins at 14:13. Black bursts appear ahead and to the sides. The German anti-aircraft guns are 88mm and 37mm, firing predicted barrages. The bursts are scattered. None are close. At 14:16, Volkov's engine temperature begins to climb. The cylinder head temperature gauge moves past the normal range. 230 degrees, 250, 270. The red line is at 280. The needle is approaching it. Volkov glances at the oil pressure gauge. It is dropping. 4 kilograms, 3.5, 3. This is not normal. This is a cooling system failure or an oil system failure or both. The engine begins to run rough. The RPM fluctuates. The propeller governor is supposed to maintain constant RPM by adjusting blade pitch. If the RPM drops, the governor decreases pitch to keep the engine speed constant. If the governor is failing, or if the oil pressure is too low to operate the governor The propeller pitch becomes fixed. A fixed-pitch propeller at high RPM creates excessive drag. The aircraft slows. At low RPM, the propeller is inefficient. The aircraft loses thrust. Volkov's airspeed is dropping, 290 kilometers per hour, 280, 270. He has three options. He can abort the attack, turn back toward friendly lines, and attempt to reach the airfield before the engine seizes. He can continue the attack and hope the engine lasts long enough to deliver the ordnance and reach friendly territory. Or he can continue the attack and accept that he may need to make a forced landing in contested territory. The first option is the safest for him and his gunner. The second option fulfills the mission but increases risk. The third option is unacceptable. Forced landings in contested territory are usually fatal. If the crew survives the landing, they are captured or killed by ground forces. Volkov chooses the second option. The mission is to destroy tanks. His aircraft carries ordnance specifically designed to destroy tanks. If he aborts, the ordnance is wasted. The tanks continue advancing. The infantry his regiment is supporting faces those tanks. This is not heroism. This is arithmetic. 1 aircraft and 2 men versus 30 tanks and their crews. The calculation is straightforward. He keys the intercom and tells Petrov, "Engine failing. We attack and then we go home direct. Watch for fighters." Petrov acknowledges. His voice is calm. He has been in this situation before. Damaged aircraft returning to base are targets. Luftwaffe fighters patrol behind Soviet lines looking for stragglers. A damaged Il-2 flying alone is easier prey than a formation of fighters. Volkov maintains position in the formation. The flight leader rolls into the attack dive. Volkov follows. The dive angle is 45 degrees. The airspeed builds despite the failing engine, 300 kilometers per hour, 320. The tanks are visible clearly now, buttoned up and firing their main guns at targets to the east. The flak intensifies. Tracer rounds arc upward. Volkov ignores them. His focus is on the dive angle and the release point. At 200 meters altitude, he releases the bomb cassettes. The cassettes separate and tumble. The small doors open and the PTAB bomblets scatter. 192 bomblets spread across an area 50 meters wide and 100 meters long. Volkov does not observe the results. He pulls out of the dive at treetop level and turns north. The G-forces during the pullout are approximately 4 Gs. The engine shudders under the load. The cylinder head temperature is now 300 degrees. The oil pressure is 1 kilogram. The engine is about to seize. Volkov reduces throttle to minimum cruise setting. Reducing power reduces heat generation. It also reduces speed. The Il-2 is now flying at 220 kilometers per hour. This is below the normal cruise speed of 260. At this speed, the glide ratio is worse. If the engine seizes, he will have less time and distance to find a landing site. The flight disperses after the attack. Each aircraft returns independently to avoid presenting a grouped target. Volkov is alone. The distance to the airfield is 38 kilometers. At 220 kilometers per hour, the flight time is 10 minutes. He needs the engine to run for 10 more minutes. At 1419, the engine temperature reaches 320 degrees. The gauge has no markings beyond 300. Volkov does not know how much higher it can go before catastrophic failure. The oil pressure is now 0. The gauge needle rests against the stump. Without oil pressure, the engine's internal bearings are running dry. The friction is generating enormous heat. The metal is expanding. The pistons are scraping against the cylinder walls. The crankshaft bearings are grinding. The engine can seize at any moment. At 1421, the RPM begins to drop. 2000 RPM, 1900, 1800. Volkov advances the throttle slightly. The RPM stabilizes at 1800 but does not climb. The engine no longer has the power to maintain higher RPM. The airspeed drops to 200 kilometers per hour. The Il-2 is now barely above stalling speed. Stall speed with full flaps is 175 kilometers per hour. Without flaps, it is 190. Volkov is flying 20 kilometers per hour above stall. Petrov's voice comes over the intercom. Fighters, 4 o'clock high. Volkov looks right and up. He sees two Messerschmitt Bf-109s diving toward him. They are 2 kilometers away and closing fast. The standard evasion for an Il-2 is to turn toward the fighters and force them into a head-on pass where the Il-2's forward-firing cannons can engage. But Volkov cannot turn aggressively. The aircraft is too slow. A tight turn will bleed airspeed and cause a stall. He can only turn gently and hope that Petrov's rear gun discourages the fighters. He banks left 10 degrees. The airspeed drops to 195. The aircraft is on the edge of stall. He levels the wings. Petrov opens fire. The UBT machine gun fires in short bursts. The tracers arc toward the fighters. The fighters break off. They do not press the attack. This is common. Fighter pilots are trained to avoid unnecessary risk. A damaged bomber flying at low speed is an easy target, but a bomber with a functioning rear gun can still kill. The risk-reward calculation does not favor the attack. The fighters climb and circle. They are waiting to see if the Il-2 will crash on its own. Volkov continues north. The engine is still running, but barely. The temperature gauge has stopped moving. It is pegged at the maximum reading. The oil pressure is 0. The RPM is now 1700. The airspeed is 185 kilometers per hour. He is 5 kilometers per hour above stall speed. He cannot slow any further. At 1423, he sees the airfield. It is 6 kilometers ahead. The grass strip is visible, a lighter green rectangle against the darker fields. He begins a shallow descent. The descent gives him airspeed, 190 kilometers per hour. 200. This is enough margin above stall. He aims for the near end of the strip. At 1425, the engine seizes. The seizure is not gradual. It is instantaneous. The crankshaft stops rotating. The propeller stops. The sudden stoppage creates a massive jolt. The aircraft pitches nose down. Volkov pushes the yoke forward to prevent a stall. The airspeed is 200 kilometers per hour. The altitude is 120 meters. The airfield is 3 kilometers ahead. An Il-2 glides at 8-to-1 ratio. From 120 meters, the glide distance is 960 meters. Volkov needs 3,000 meters. The mathematics are clear. He will not reach the airfield. He looks for an alternative. Ahead is farmland, plowed fields and pastures. The fields are flat and clear. A forced landing in a field is survivable if the aircraft remains upright. The Il-2's landing gear is fixed, which means it cannot be retracted. Landing gear down in a soft field often causes the aircraft to nose over. But landing gear up risks rupturing the fuel tanks and fire. Volkov chooses gear down. He picks a field 1 kilometer ahead. The field is recently plowed, which means the soil is soft. Soft soil will slow the aircraft quickly, but it will also dig into the gear. He aligns with the field and maintains glide speed. 200 kilometers per hour. The rate of descent is 6 meters per second. He is losing altitude rapidly. At 50 meters, he flares slightly. The nose comes up. The airspeed bleeds off. 170 kilometers per hour. 160. The main gear touches. The impact is hard. The gear sinks into the soft soil. The aircraft decelerates violently. Volkov is thrown forward against his harness. The nose gear collapses. The propeller strikes the ground and shatters. The aircraft slides forward on its belly. The friction generates a cloud of dust. The Il-2 slides for 80 meters and stops. Volkov sits in the cockpit and assesses. He is not injured. The cockpit is intact. He smells coolant and hot metal but not fuel. He does not see fire. He releases his harness and climbs out. Petrov is already out of his position and jumping down from the wing. They both run 20 meters from the aircraft and stop. They wait for fire. None comes. The regiment's recovery team arrives 30 minutes later. The team consists of a truck with a crane and 6 mechanics. They examine the aircraft. The engine is destroyed. The crankshaft is seized. The cylinder head is cracked. The oil system is ruptured. The undercarriage is damaged. The propeller is destroyed. The team leader determines that the aircraft cannot be repaired in the field. It must be transported back to the workshop. The team attaches cables and lifts the Il-2 onto a flatbed trailer. The recovery takes 2 hours. Volkov and Petrov ride in the truck back to the airfield. They are met by the regimental commander, who debriefs them. Volkov describes the mission. The attack was successful. The engine failed after ordnance release. He landed in a field short of the airfield. The commander asks if the mission was completed. Volkov confirms that all ordnance was delivered on target. The commander notes this in his report. The debriefing is brief. The commander is satisfied that the mission was executed correctly. Equipment failure is expected. Engines fail. The important point is that the ordnance was delivered and the crew survived. Volkov and Petrov are released. They walk to the mess and eat. The meal is kasha and black bread. They eat in silence. The reconnaissance photographs taken after the mission show the results of the attack. The tank column was struck by the Il-2 flight. 7 tanks are destroyed. 4 more are damaged. The column halted and dispersed. The advance was delayed by 6 hours. This is the strategic outcome. 7 tanks destroyed represents approximately 1 platoon. In the context of the Battle of Kursk, where thousands of tanks are engaged, 7 tanks is not a large number, but the delay matters. 6 hours allows Soviet reserves to reposition. Artillery can adjust fire. Reinforcements can arrive. The cumulative effect of multiple strikes across the entire front creates disruption that exceeds the sum of individual losses. Volkov's Il-2, Y-27, is transported to the regimental workshop. The mechanics disassemble the engine. They determine that the cooling system failed due to a puncture in the coolant radiator. The puncture was caused by a shell fragment, likely from flak encountered during the previous mission. The fragment created a small hole that leaked coolant slowly. By the time the attack on July 9th began, the coolant level was critically low. Without adequate coolant, the engine overheated. The excessive heat caused the oil to thin and lose pressure. Without oil pressure, the bearings failed. The engine seized. The radiator puncture was small enough that it did not leak noticeably on the ground. The coolant level appeared normal during the pre-flight inspection. Only under the thermal stress of flight did the leak become critical. This is a known failure mode. Radiators are vulnerable to damage. Inspections cannot always detect small punctures. The mechanics recommend more frequent inspections and pressure testing of the cooling system. The recommendation is noted, but not implemented. There are not enough mechanics or time to pressure test every aircraft before every mission. Y-27 is stripped for parts. The wings are salvaged. The cannons are salvaged. The armor shell is intact and is removed for potential reuse. The engine is beyond repair and is scrapped. The fuselage is abandoned in the field beside the workshop. It remains there for the duration of the war. After the war, it is buried during field clearance operations. No photographs of Y-27 are known to exist. Volkov returns to flight status on July 11th. He is assigned a different aircraft, White-31. He flies a mission that afternoon, a strike against German artillery positions. The mission is routine. He returns without incident. Between July 11th and August 10th, he flies 34 more missions. He is awarded the Order of the Red Star on August 2nd for completing 250 combat sorties. The citation mentions his skill and dedication. It does not mention the forced landing on July 9th because forced landings are routine. On August 23rd, Volkov's aircraft is hit by German anti-aircraft fire over Kharkov. The engine catches fire. He attempts to reach friendly lines, but the fire spreads. He orders Petrov to bail out. Petrov jumps. Volkov jumps 10 seconds later. Both parachutes deploy successfully. They land in Soviet-held territory. Volkov fractures his left ankle during the landing. He is evacuated to a field hospital. Petrov is uninjured. Volkov spends 4 weeks in hospital. His ankle heals. He is returned to the regiment in September. He flies 21 more missions before the regiment is withdrawn from the front in October for rest and re-equipment. He is promoted to captain. In November, he is posted to a training regiment as an instructor. He spends the remainder of the war training new pilots. He does not return to combat operations. Petrov remains with the regiment. He is assigned to a different pilot. He flies 63 more missions before the war ends. He survives. He is demobilized in September of 1945 and returns to his village in Tambov Oblast. He works as a mechanic at a collective farm. He does not speak about the war except to say that he served as an air gunner. When asked about specific missions, he says they were all similar. This is accurate. The missions were repetitive and procedural. The outcomes varied, but the procedures did not. The tactical impact of the mission on July 9th is contained within the immediate results. 7 tanks destroyed, 4 damaged, column delayed 6 hours. The strategic impact is negligible. The Battle of Kursk was decided by large-scale armored engagements and by the Soviet ability to absorb losses and commit reserves. Individual airstrikes contributed incrementally but were not decisive. The German offensive was halted on July 12th. By July 16th, Soviet forces began counteroffensives. By August 5th, the Germans were in retreat. The war on the Eastern Front shifted permanently in favor of the Soviet Union. But the mission illustrates a principle common to ground attack aviation. The mission can be completed even when the aircraft is failing. Volkov's engine was failing from 1416 onward. He could have aborted. He chose to complete the attack. This decision was replicated thousands of times by Il-2 pilots throughout the war. The aircraft's armor allowed pilots to survive damage that would have been fatal in unarmored aircraft. The ruggedness of the design allowed pilots to fly damaged aircraft back to base or to controlled crash sites. The result was a high sortie completion rate despite heavy damage. Soviet records indicate that Il-2 regiments completed 87% of assigned missions during the Battle of Kursk. This completion rate includes missions where aircraft were damaged but continued to target. It does not include missions where aircraft were shot down before reaching the target. The completion rate is high compared to other ground attack aircraft. The German Ju-87 Stuka, for comparison, had a completion rate of 73% during the same period. The difference is attributable to armor and design philosophy. The Il-2 was designed to absorb damage and continue operating. The Stuka was not. The long-term impact of the Il-2 program is measurable. Between 1941 and 1945, Soviet factories produced 36,000 Il-2s. This is the largest production run of any military aircraft in history. The aircraft equipped 132 ground attack regiments. These regiments flew approximately 1.5 million sorties. The loss rate was 4.2% per sortie. This means 63,000 Il-2s were lost. The remaining aircraft survived the war and were either scrapped or converted to other uses. The Il-2's effectiveness is debated by historians. German accounts describe the Il-2 as devastating. Soviet accounts describe it as adequate. Post-war analysis suggests the truth is between these positions. The Il-2 was effective against soft targets, trucks, artillery, infantry. It was less effective against tanks than Soviet propaganda claimed. The PTAB bomblets could destroy tanks, but only with direct hits on the top armor. Most bomblets missed. The hit rate was approximately 3%. This means that to destroy one tank, 33 bomblets had to be dropped. An Il-2 carried 192 bomblets, theoretically enough to destroy 5 to 6 tanks per sortie. In practice, the average was 1 to 2 tanks destroyed per 8 aircraft formation. This is still significant when aggregated across thousands of sorties. The Il-2's greatest contribution was disruption. A tank column under air attack disperses, halts, and seeks cover. This delays the advance. Artillery under air attack ceases fire and relocates. This reduces fire support for German infantry. Supply columns under air attack stop moving. This disrupts logistics. The cumulative effect of these disruptions is difficult to quantify, but it is real. The German Army's operational tempo on the Eastern Front was consistently slower than planned. Air attack is one contributing factor. Volkov did not think in terms of strategic impact. He thought in terms of missions completed. Each mission had an objective: destroy a specific target. If the target was destroyed, the mission was successful. If the aircraft returned, the crew could fly again. These were the metrics that mattered. The broader strategic picture was not his concern. His concern was executing procedures correctly and surviving long enough to fly the next mission. He succeeded. He flew 284 combat missions. He was shot down 3 times, forced landed 6 times, and wounded twice. He survived the war. He was awarded 2 Orders of the Red Star and the Order of the Patriotic War. He did not consider these awards significant. They were recognition that he had completed many missions. Completing missions was his job. After the war, Volkov remained in the Air Force. He served as an instructor until 1953, when he transferred to civil aviation. He flew Aeroflot cargo flights for 20 years. He retired in 1973. He died in 1992 at the age of 71. His obituary mentioned his military service and his awards. It did not mention the forced landing on July 9, 1943, because that event was not exceptional. It was one of 6 forced landings he survived. The fact that he continued the mission before the forced landing was also not exceptional. It was standard procedure. The field where White 27 landed is now part of a collective farm near Prokhorovka. The field is still used for agriculture. The soil is dark and fertile. Nothing marks the location where an Il-2 slid to a stop with a seized engine. The aircraft was removed. The furrows were replanted. The war moved west, and the field returned to cultivation. If you stand in that field today, you see wheat or sunflowers, depending on the season. The horizon is flat. The sky is wide. The field looks as it did in 1943, except that there are no aircraft overhead and no columns of tanks moving along the roads. The war is gone. The men who fought it are gone. What remains is the land and the sky and the knowledge that ordinary men executed extraordinary missions as a matter of procedure. Volkov understood this. He did not consider his actions on July 9th exceptional. He completed the mission with a failing engine because that was the mission. The engine seized and he landed in a field because that was the outcome. He survived because the aircraft was designed to be survivable and because he executed the landing correctly. These are facts, not heroics. The lesson, if there is a lesson, is about design and doctrine. The Il-2 was designed to complete missions under damage. The doctrine assumed that aircraft would be damaged and that pilots would continue operating until completion or failure. This combination of design and doctrine produced a high mission completion rate. The cost was high. 63,000 Il-2s were lost. But the missions were completed. The tanks were delayed. The artillery was disrupted. The supplies were interdicted. Wars are not won by individual missions. They are won by the cumulative effect of thousands of missions executed with discipline and persistence. Volkov's mission on July 9th was one of 1.5 million Il-2 sorties flown during the war. It was not exceptional. It was representative, and that is why it matters. The sky over Kursk is still there, the fields are still there, the roads are still there, the war is gone, the machines are gone, the men are gone. What remains is the record of what they did, when they did it, and why it mattered. And sometimes, when the circumstances aligned correctly and the pilot followed procedure, the mission was completed even when the engine seized.